on the parents as well as the students. And actually, they are not based on, actually, they are only done for marks. It's not actually learning. And they emphasize on only few curriculums. Like, suppose some chapters I'm well versed, so I focus on those chapters to get marks. Like, whichever part is more scoring, we focus on that. And second thing is, they, in order to get marks, they go for coaching and a lot of stress, and then admission to different colleges based on this. The marks on assessment plays a very important role in this assessment system, the present one. So it should not be like this. It should not. It should be only for certification and experiences, like learning experiences. It should not be like whatever is done now. So some of the universities are now focusing on this, and it has to be done. I mean, these are the current challenges in assessment that I
Yes.
have
So,
understood.
moreover, assessments are to be conducted to check the competencies and learning outcomes, whether they have met or
Yeah,
not. And there
yeah,
shouldn't be a pressure of board exams on the students. It has to be easy
yeah,
for students. It is not that
yeah.
parents also start taking stress about the board
Yes,
exams.
yes, yes,
Great,
yes.
wonderful, ma'am. Key principles of effective assessment. Aarti, ma'am, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, start reading, ma'am.
Key principles that could guide our thinking on effective use of assessments to aid better teaching and learning are listed below. A. Assessment should measure achievements of competencies and learning outcomes leading to attainment of curricular goals. Assessment should explicitly track students' progress in all aspects of learning as stated in the competencies for each stage and learning outcomes for each grade. Assessment should accurately reflect the intent of evaluating the achievement of a competency or learning outcome. The connection between the competency or learning outcome and the assessment should be clear and precise. Alignment with the competencies and learning outcomes to be assessed.
Great. Chitra, ma'am, could you just summarize this one?
Yeah. So what is the purpose of assessment? The assessment should be measuring their competencies and whether they have achieved the learning outcomes which have been fixed or which is expected from a particular lesson or a chapter or whatever it is, and for each grade. So if that is being done and that intention or that is being reflected, then we can say that this assessment is okay and it has achieved its purpose.
Great. Continue, Aarti.
Assessment should be constructive, developmental, and learning focused. Assessments need to be visualized as an ongoing process where teachers integrate within the teaching learning process using formal and informal ways to elicit reliable evidences about student learning. Collecting such evidence helps teacher understand the effectiveness of their pedagogy in terms of what students have understood, what needs to be worked on further, which methods of teaching work, what kind of resources work, and so on. For students, assessments need to be placed as an important tool that will help them understand and reflect on their own learning. Assessment should not become an intimidating process that involves the labeling and segregation of students.
Chitra, ma'am.
Yeah. So here, the purpose of assessment is should be constructive. That is, which will help them to improve themselves. That is development also and learning focus. The point is whether what has to be conveyed has been understood exactly by the child or not. If not, then it also means that the teacher has gone wrong. So it also helps the teacher to understand the effectiveness of the method she has chosen for that particular lesson and helps her to change if required. And it also tells the children that whether they have understood it in the way it was expected, because sometimes more than one uh, thing may be conveyed or interpreted from that. So whether they have got the exact interpretation of it, like I would like to just add here something like a particular poem or a book or something like that can be taught at different levels. So if at grade 6 that lesson is being taught, the purpose might be different. So whether that has been achieved or not has to be understood, and that is how the assessments have to be. It should not be to create a fear. So like they say that it is not to test whether the teacher's knowledge, but it is to test what the child has understood and how he or she can develop further.
Yeah, even what
Yes.
type of resources can be used, what type
Yes,
of
yes.
like
And it can be
methodology has to be
multidimensional.
used.
It doesn't have to be always paper pen. It can be tested
Yes,
in different.
it can be informal as well.
Yeah.
And also, it should be in such a way that they also use it for self-reflection.
Yes.
Assessment also should motivate self-reflection of the children. So it is a very good tool. Assessment is a very good tool to understand the teaching learning process. And one thing that they have highlighted over here is it shouldn't be an intimidating process, which means fearfully doing something. Assessment shouldn't become a fearful thing. Children actually should enjoy. To reflect upon themselves, they have to enjoy giving an assessment. Yes, assessment should be said. Yes, ma'am. Aarti ma'am.
One more thing, it should not be generating anxiety in the students. I mean, they
Mhm.
should, I mean, it should be seen as a monitor where whether we are able to do it or we still have to change the pedagogies.
Yes,
Next,
yes.
assessments should be stage appropriate. At the foundational stage, teachers would primarily drive all assessment activities, which are largely based on observation. At the preparatory and middle stage, multiple tools and methods should be introduced. Students should also be given a more proactive role in assessing their own learning trajectories. Additionally, at the secondary stage, students should be prepared to take standardized tests, including board and other examinations.
Yes, Chitrama.
Yeah.
Yes. So the assessment should be so equipped that it matches the stage that is at the foundational, the preparatory, the middle, and so it shouldn't be a similar type of test in all stages. So in the preparatory stages, in the foundational stage, it has to be mainly through observation. It should not be through it should not be through paper and pen. It should be more through observation. In preparatory and multiple stages, we can use multiple tools, various formal as well as informal tools to assess the child. And and it should be in such a way that the children themselves are able to understand what they have learned and how much they have improved, maybe through peer assessment or peer checking or whatever it is. And at the secondary stage here, besides these things like the formal and informal, they should also be prepared to take the standardized test, which is preparing them for the boards, because here they have to become more accountable for their performances because they'll go to the next level.
So several practices are to be given, are to be followed at the
Yeah.
school, getting them ready for the board examinations. That too in a appropriate and a happy manner. Yes. Next one, ma'am.
Assessments should accommodate student diversity. It is important to move away from the one size fits all approach while designing assessments. A variety of assessment methods, example paper pencil test, oral assessments, project work, and group assignments should be used. Assessment tools and processes must accommodate for students performing at different levels in a classroom. Well designed, graded assessment can be used to understand individual student needs better so that their learning needs can be adequately catered to.
Great.
So,
Chitrama.
yeah. So here, what they are talking about is that we should have different tools, and they should be in such a way that it helps all the children. It caters to the needs of different kinds of children, children with different learning abilities, so that they are all able to. Because if one child is able to do paper pen test well, they may not be very good at project work or may not be good at something else. So this type of different tools, if they are used, then all the children will get a chance to prove themselves, and the final result will be a culmination of all these activities that they have done, so that they will feel encouraged to do better rather than being feeling inferior or something like that. And it doesn't generate, or doesn't generalize them or put them into groups that they haven't performed because we used only one particular tool. So we have to use various tools so that we are able to cater to the needs of each and every type of student who have different learning abilities, so that we are catering to them and helping them to improve.
I just
So
want to
just
add
like
one more
different
point. In
learning,
different stages, different assessment,
yes.
approaches for different learners. Yeah.
Yes.
Again, it's stage wise and learner wise. Yeah, Aarti
yeah,
ma'am
the
wanted to
way
say
we had
something.
differentiated learning, the way we had differentiated learning, I think they have a reference that testing also should be at the different
Yes,
At
levels.
different
different
times.
So
as
that
per
Yes.
the
both
learners.
improve. Yeah,
As
yeah,
per the learners. Maybe a
yeah.
child is not good at writing. Maybe he's good at orals, isn't
Yeah.
it? So we have to motivate oral assessments and
Yeah.
slowly get him on the track to give a written assessment. That's how it is. Great, Chitra
So
ma'am. Next.
assessments should be supported by timely, credible, and constructive feedback to the students. Students should be given useful feedback on their performance. Such feedback needs to be constructive while information with information on what has worked well and what areas might need improvement and how can this be achieved. Use of holistic progress card, that is HPCs, that detail out students' performance in multiple aspects, including formative and summative assessments, should be explored. That's
Chitra ma'am.
again HPC.
Yeah. So before we go on to the final assessment and for the final feedback, the feedback has to be given at the initial stage also. At every stage, in fact, the proper feedback should be given so that the child knows exactly where he is going wrong and can work on it. And this is required before we finally check the final paper and then tell him, okay, this is where you went wrong. And that is why the need of the holistic progress card, because it will help or to tell the child about multiple aspects and the formative and the summative assessment. And this needs to be explored so that we give a regular feedback to the child. And at the end, the child himself or herself can see the progress he has made.
Yes, and it is a
Yes.
holistic progress card wherein peer
Yeah,
assessment is there, student
all
self-assessment is
types of
there,
assessment.
teachers assessment is there, and the parents assessment is also there. All and it's for all formative and summative assessments. Great, ma'am. And multiple aspects. It is not just academics, all the aspects of learning. Great.
Yes.
Next one.
Assessment should support in meaningful aggregation or summation of students' learning. While the formative function of assessment is critical, the summative function of assessment is also important. Summative examinations, including certification examinations, continue to be relevant as they serve as a necessary test to understand students' achievement of competencies and learning outcomes. While the significance of summative examination is well established, what needs immediate attention is the approach to the same. Examinations should move away from testing rote memorization and instead focus on conceptual understanding, application of concepts, problem solving abilities, critical thinking, and other such capacities.
Chitra, ma'am.
So here they are saying that both formative as well as summative, both are equally important for a student. So while summative, it includes the certificates or it includes the uh, process where we talk about being giving promoted to the next class and all that, we should understand that the formative assessments are also equally important because it tests the competencies and learning outcomes. And these assessments which are being taken at the summative level also should not promote rote learning only. They should also be done in such a way or conducted in such a way that they are able to check on the application of concepts, on the understanding, the problem solving abilities, the critical thinking, the competencies. Basically, it should test the competencies so that the child doesn't have to depend on rote learning at the last moment. He has to learn, it has to be a regular practice of learning so that the development is gradual and in a continuous way, and the learning outcome is much better than what is happening right now
Great.
in the
Great,
present.
ma'am. Yes. Suchitra, ma'am. Types of assessment.
Types of assessment. Assessments could be formative or summative, and both are important for improving teaching and learning. A. Formative assessments are continuous and ongoing. They are used to track student learning to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by teachers to improve their teaching and by students to improve their learning. Formative assessments are generally low stake and do not have strong consequences. Some examples of formative assessments include observing student behavior in class, asking students to draw a concept map in class to represent their understanding of a topic, and asking students to write a few sentences with a friend on a poem that they have read.
Yes.
B. Summative
Saima ma'am, we will finish off this and we. Saima ma'am, Miss Saima Siddiqui. Yeah. Could you summarize formative assessments, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Sir, the formative assessment is the ongoing process which is done during the teaching and the learning. When the teaching and learning is going on in the classroom, formative assessment is done during that, so that proper feedback should be given to the student, and whatever remediation is required, teachers are able to give the remediation on time. While summative assessment, I feel, is the final assessment which happens after the teaching and learning, and to test the knowledge and the conceptual understanding of the child after conducting the formative assessment. So, formative assessment is basically a continuous and time-to-time assessment which a teacher takes after every concept and to give a proper and a constructive feedback to the child, while the summative assessment is done after the formative assessment to finally understand how much learning has happened. And also, the formative assessment is a proper and a very constructive way to give a feedback to the teacher that whether the teacher, the teaching methodology that the teacher is following or conducting in the class is proper, and every child sitting in the class is able to understand, and the teacher is able to cater the all types of learners.
Great, great. Suchitra ma'am, summative assessments. You're on mute, ma'am.
Summative assessments evaluate student learning at the end of a lesson or a logical period of teaching. Summative assessments are normally higher stake in that they compare student performance to a benchmark or standard and have some consequence. Some examples of summative assessments include a term end test or a board exam. Results of summative assessments can also be used for formative purposes, that is, for informing teaching and learning. It is very important to note that the core difference between summative and formative assessment is the purpose for which the assessment is used. Formative assessment is used as a part of and as input to teaching learning process, whereas summative assessment is about evaluation of achievement of learning over a period of time. The same tool, instrument, method, or form can be used for summative or formative assessment when suitably designed. For example, the often used paper pencil test or written test can be used to assess what a student is struggling with and focus the next class on that matter, which is formative assessment. On the other hand, as we know well, paper pencil tests or written tests are used as standard for the year-end examinations, which are summative assessments.
Great. Saima ma'am, can you just summarize this summative assessments? There is a lot of disturbance. Yes.
So, summative assessment is an assessment which is conducted after a particular period of time where the teacher feels that now the child is ready, the learner is ready, and the conceptual understanding and the competency has been built in the student. So, summative assessment is conducted after a period of time to test the knowledge gained by the children. And I think it is the final assessment which tells the teacher that while teaching and taking a particular concept, the methods that she had adopted were proper, and she was able to adopt a different methodology so that distinct learners and the differentiated learners have been catered. So I think summative assessment is an assessment which is a final assessment after a period of time.
So it's a periodical assessment. After a certain period of time, a summative assessment is conducted to judge the child, to certify the child, whether
Yes,
the
yes,
learning, whether he has met the minimum levels of learning of that particular stage or not. Apart from that,
yes. So somewhere I had read that if we consider a teacher as a cook, and if the teaching is a meal that she is preparing, that while preparing the meal, when she tests the meal in between, that is the formative assessment. And after that, when the meal is ready to be eaten, that is the summative assessment.
Line given here, formative assessment is used as a part of and as input to teaching learning process. Okay, it's a part of
Correct.
teaching learning process, also an input to teaching learning process. Whereas summative assessment is about evaluation of achievement of learning over a period of time. And we can
Time.
use the same tools here and there. Same tools can be used in formative assessment as well as summative assessment,
Summative assessment.
but we have to remember the purpose very well. So I suppose that's all for today. Tomorrow we will be doing forms of assessment. Thank you one and all for
Thank you,
joining. I
sir.
suppose today we have had a good number of participants. Yes. So those who are
Thank you,
willing
sir.
to read, or those who are willing to, like summarize the things, you can just raise your hand and leave a, text in the chat box, sir, that I want to read out or I want to summarize, so that everyone can actively participate. So it is like a peer learning rather than a one-sided learning. It becomes a peer learning. Now we can hear to everyone's interpretation, isn't it? Great. So that's all for today. We will meet again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. Thank you, sir. Good day, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.